This is Hidden Killers Live with Tony Brueski and Robin Dreeke.
14-year-old girl gave a forensic interview. The father made a call, and then Joseph Duggar allegedly admitted to everything. To the victim's father, and then again to detectives. And now he's sitting in an Arkansas County jail, about 7 miles that way from me, waiting to be extradited to Florida on felony child abuse charges. And his wife is facing her own counts in a separate but connected investigation in Arkansas. 2 states, 2 cases, a recorded confession, and a family with a documented pattern of handling exactly this kind of thing internally, because that's what you do. The legal picture here is as complicated as it is damning, and if anyone can break down what Joseph Duggar's defense actually looks like from the inside out, it's a criminal defense attorney who's seen cases like this from every angle. Bob Motta, defense attorney, joining myself and Robin Dreeke today as we discuss a lot, and we will start with the Duggar situation, and we invite your thoughts, your comments in the comments section wherever you are watching us right now. Let's start here. Bob, Joseph Duggar allegedly admitted to the abuse to the victim's father, and then to Tawnytown detectives who were on the line, reportedly confirmed during a recorded phone call. Walk us through, what a defense attorney is actually working with when a client has already made statements like that before an attorney is anywhere near the picture of what's going on here. What kind of situation are we looking at for the defense of Joseph Duggar?
A bad one for Joseph Duggar. Like, all jokes aside, it's the first thing I ask a client when they walk in, or a prospective client. Did you talk?
Yeah.
You know, did you make a statement to law enforcement? And that's typically where I'm at with respect to whether or not it's going to be suppressible. You know, there's going to be a lot of things you're going to have to look at it, because that's where you're at. If there's a statement out there and it's incredibly damning, the best that you can hope to do is defense attorneys look at it and say, all right, well, was it a tap? Was it an over here? Did they go and get a warrant? In terms of, you know, the over here that they definitely have, but the statements with respect to the initial statement was that, and you've got 2 states involved, right? You've got Arkansas and Florida. Yeah. I think Florida they're wide open down there. The Sunshine State. Yeah. You can just do anything you want down there. They want everything out in the sunshine. I think that like Arkansas, and you might know, Tone, is a one person consent state. So, you know, I mean, you're going to have to try to attack it, because once you see that it exists in the world, it becomes probably the worst evidence that they have against you, because it's a confession. You know, there's no other way to slice it.
I mean, how do you go about going into a case like? I mean, is this a case that is likely to even go to a trial? I mean, once you have a confession like that, or is it some sort of a deal that is made, or is it, let's take this to trial and I'm likely to be found guilty, but I'm gonna negotiate this, I'm gonna plead this to be less than what they're saying it is that I did. I don't know. I mean, where does something like this go when this is our start off point?
This is what I'm always talking about, and I'm always trying to remind people that a vast majority of cases do not go to trial. They get let out. When I have evidence like this, it's typically, and I know about it on the front end. Like, so if I ask that question, did you make a statement? And he's sitting in front of me, or, you know, if I've gone to do a jail visit and he's like, yeah, you know, I made a statement. And then I'm saying, okay, well, what'd you say? And then he says, this is what I said. I'll say, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. I have to wait until we get the police reports. I have to see how they say that this went down. I need to see if there were warrants involved. And at that point, if there's a way that I can bring a viable motion to suppress, then we can try it. After that, if that fails, then we're dealing with a piece of evidence that's going to be impossible to get over. And what I'm recommending to you is that I start having a conversation about a plea. And we, you know, but ultimately at the end of the day, the sticking point is always whether or not somebody wants to go to trial is not the lawyer's choice. Okay.
Sure.
All we can do is advise them. We think it's a bad idea. There could be a trial tax. If you plead this thing out, maybe we shave a couple of years off of it, whatever the case may be. But I mean, the reality is this thing quickly shifts into the latter of what you were talking about, where you're trying to work out a plea deal and you're trying to see if you can help them in any way in terms of shaving a bit of time off, but reality is when the state has that kind of evidence and it's your own words. And these aren't Richard Allen confessions. Like,
right. No torture involved here.
I guess I did it. Apparently I did it. This is the guy talking about it at length, things that only he would know. So it's a death knell to any kind of potential trial. So I'd be stunned if it didn't get pled out, but I've been stunned before,
Sure.
And Bob, I'm curious, how does, if it does at all, this family's got now a track record of some really abhorrent behavior with Josh beforehand. How is that going to enter into this at any point, and whether it goes to trial or it's going to be mitigated out beforehand through a plea deal? Is that looked at by anyone?
I think it's looked at probably by the state, but in terms of relevance, if it were to go to trial, I don't know that it would be relevant in terms of, because look, it's relevant to us in the real world.
Right. Sure.
But when you're talking about a trial, it's got to be relevant to the case that's before either the judge or the jury. And bad behavior of other family members, while it may show a pattern and that there were issues with this family, clearly, is relevant again in the real world. But in terms of this particular case, unless you're going with some kind of mental defect type of defense.
So actually, to follow on with that, I've been, as you'll know, I've been binge watching the Duggars. I've been reading Jill's book, and what's been really, really striking is the trauma that the other siblings were exposed to by Josh and now another.
Yep.
And I'm curious, as a defense attorney, how challenging is it to work with potential people, both prosecution and defense, that a lot of times the siblings are excusing the behavior, which it breaks your heart even more. They're downplaying that they're just, they are really not wanting to hurt their brothers in earlier statements. So I'm curious how hard and challenging that is to work with as an attorney, trying to show the true criminality here, when a lot of times the people involved are trying to say, yeah, he did it, but it's not criminal. I don't care. I want, they just want it to go away.
Yeah, and that's that thing that we talk about, it seems like weekly, where I'm kind of discussing the fact of the matter is that we're dealing with the defendant. So we're in a unique position that the state does not have any kind of access to the defendant. So like we're dealing with it on a more human level, whereas prosecutors are typically looking at it as a piece of paper, a name on a piece of paper, and facts, and we're just plowing through. That's something that we always have to deal with. Like when I was representing Anthony Garcia, who, his family came up with the money to hire us, and they're sitting there stunned that their son has been accused of murdering 4 people over 5 years, like stunned. Right. Like they had no inkling of knowing that he was capable of this. They had they couldn't wrap their mind around it, So, every situation obviously is different, but in terms of like trying to get the family over the hump is also made more difficult depending on whether or not you've got a client who's made admissions to you as the attorney, or if you believe that your client is coming in and they're saying that they didn't do this, you get the discovery and you're tending to agree with them based on the lack of evidence. How do you handle that with the family other than preparing them for kind of the inevitable thing, which is he's going to be sitting at that defendant's table. The likelihood is that he's going to get convicted because juries want to hold somebody accountable for heinous acts. So it's a challenging aspect of it. And Robin, like you had kind of aptly brought up, like, I don't know if it was the last time we were on or the time before, we have to wear a lot of different hats. I mean, there is that psychology hat that we have to put on in terms of how to deal with the family that is going to be resistant to wanting to assign blame or resistant to accepting the fact that they've done this thing. And, ultimately at the end of the day, the bottom line is whatever's going on with the family doesn't affect in any way, shape, or form our representation of our client. I mean, our duty is to that person and that person alone. But the reality of the situation is you're trying to juggle all these different things when you're handling a case like that. And it's hard. And it's a difficult thing to tangle with, because you've got families that are devastated or in denial, and you're sitting there and you're like, man, and frankly, I can't relay what my client is saying to me. I mean, I've got attorney-client privilege, and I explain that to them on the front end. They're not able to sit in with us when I'm having an interview with my client because it breaks privilege, So it's like you kind of have to keep them in the dark to a certain extent, but you're trying to prepare them for the worst depending on where they're at with it. You know what I mean? If they're in denial, if they're just like refusing to be helpful in any way because they just don't want to hurt that person because they love them and it's their sibling. And, you can't detach yourself from somebody you've unconditionally loved your entire life, and all of a sudden they've done something horrible, or they're accused to have done something horrible. It doesn't make you not love that person anymore. I mean, it may make you think about them differently, but still, and it's hard to quantify what love is in words. It's more of a feeling. We've been trying to do it since we could put paper to pen to describe what love is. But I mean, all of it's challenging. And, this family, man, the psychopathy of it in terms of it, it's just a lot.
Here's where it gets me, because if somebody's not aware, they're part of this IBLP structure, which is a religion, and I put it in air quotes. They basically have a structure where you don't necessarily report wrongdoing to authorities on everything. There we go. If you're watching us on YouTube, that is their little chart. Their umbrellas. There's Christ, which is the church, and Christ and Bill Gothard, they hang out. They go to Denny's on the breakfast buffet, and they get the Rudy Tooty fresh and fruity, and then everything's great. And then there's the husband that's underneath God and Bill Gothard. He's probably going to the IHOP. He doesn't quite get the Denny's Rudy Tooty fresh and fruity, but you got the husband, and then everybody below the husband, which is the wife, the children, the victims, everyone. They all have to go to the husband and then report, and then the husband decides if this is something that is appropriate to report to the authorities. And we all know in the first round of this horror story that Jim Bob allegedly decided, we're going to kind of hold this one in. We're going to hold this one close to the vest when the allegations came in from his own daughters of their son doing things to them, until finally a family friend said, you know what, Jim Bob? This whole campaign thing that you got going on, your whole political platform that you're running on, these things, these virtues that you claim you hold dear to your heart that come from God himself, you're kind of going against all that shit by not turning your son in for doing what he did to your daughters. And then it was, okay, maybe we should do something about that. You kind of got, it's a different aspect over here because Jim Bob's, as far as we know, is not involved in this conversation, although who knows, the day is young. But what we understand is that Joseph here, this is 5 years ago they did this, when the girl was 9. He was like 25, 26. He's sitting on a couch with a 9-year-old several times with a blanket over them, and then he's doing things with his hands. And that's all we need to say. This is what's going on 5 years ago. And then the girl finally comes out, says this, admits it, tells it to her father. The father calls Joseph and says, hey, I hear something happened on the couch with my daughter. Joseph comes clean. And then he gets the officer on the line from Arkansas, and then he comes clean again. And it's not clear if Joseph was aware the officer was on the line. I'm going to take a wild guess that the answer is no.
Right.
But he did then again say, yes, I did this.
See, that's that overhear thing that I'm talking about. So,
Yeah.
like, if you're going to get an overhear, I mean, we've handled
Consent,
cases
right,
where
depends on state.
Yeah.
it does, but like typically, if it's a law enforcement overhear and they're using a CI, and typically it's
But
somebody that's involved
Yeah.
with that person and or a relative of the victim. You know, most of the times it's a baby mama or
Yeah.
you know, a parent of the child that was abused, that was in a relationship with that person, because you see it all the time. You see it with like in you know, boyfriend,
Yeah.
step parent relationships where you see abuse happening, and then there's an outcry sometimes many times after the relationship has been terminated for whatever reasons. And then at that point they make the outcry, the kid does, and then the parent goes to law enforcement. They're like, all right, this is what we need to do.
Yeah.
We're going to go in, we're going to get a tap warrant, an overhear warrant, and we're going to be listening. So you're not necessarily, it's kind of like when they'd wire somebody up, except it's via phone calls. So, but it's like, you got to go in. Obviously they're going to have the probable cause to get it. And many times, and the cops are literally sitting there, like listening, just like in the movie.
I mean, how much does this complicate it when you have a family that doesn't believe in going to police when this sort of stuff happens? I mean, they're treating it like, oh shucks, you caught me. It makes me curious. Like, I wonder how honest he's going to be with his own defense attorney. You know, when they hold all these things in close until they're called out on, which seems to be the track record, that's got to make things a little bit more complicated and illegal. But they always, and they hold religion as the reasoning for their thought process or their lack of accountability under the law. Does that play in at all under the law? Their religion and their belief system of, well, we handle these things internally and we don't go to the law, even though, you know, under the law we have to, but we don't, because our religion supersedes it.
Yeah, no, that's not how it works.
Yeah, I didn't think so. Yeah.
Well, and you saw the guardrails. You know, we talk about guardrails on these things, and when Tony had the graphic up of the umbrella, you know, Christ, Father, whatever, those are the guardrails. Nowhere in those guardrails did you see legality, state law, federal law. There was no guardrails.
They invent their own.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, let me ask you this: how did it work for Lori Vallow? Well, they were all just vessels. They were demons. They weren't even humans anymore. And it's like, in that case in particular, I'm like, this woman's batshit crazy. You know what I mean? And like the challenge for the defense in that case is that they don't have the insanity defense available to defendants in that state. You can only go in and attack, kind of the mens rea portion of a statute by saying this person could not form the requisite intent because of a mental defect. So they have like a semblance of it, but you know, like you're not going to be able to lean on religion if it entails, being a pedophile or murdering people. You can't say, well, you know, that's what our religion calls for. We keep it all in house. We deal with it. We deal with it on our own. That's,
you know, it's also interesting too. You know, just the difference between Vallow's, you know, small, you know, crazy cult mentality. And I mean, she had roughly their followers, you know, of people of their mindset. They had roughly 5 to 10, maybe 15, 20 at their height until the real crazy came out. Yeah. But it's interesting. But with the IBLP, this is a massive, massive group that has tons of social proof that's reinforcing itself about how to handle all these situations. And so, you know, defense. Yeah, you're right. It does not fit within the legal guidelines of anything of what is right or not right. But I wonder how much they might try to fall back on. Hey, this is the way we handle things. This is how we, you know, because I mean, their reform project for Josh was to send him away to one of the free labor camps that's run by IBLP. Seriously, it is labor. They got labor camps for kids.
It's kind of like Scientology in a way. It's like Sea Org to a certain. They're kind of like Scientology light in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
but way out there where it's
Yeah.
exposed to everyone. It's like you can sign up, go to a website. You can literally sign up right now if you want to go to one of their clinics and camps. I was looking at it right before we came on air.
Oh, I saw it. There's a workshop coming up in April that maybe we
Yes.
should take a field trip to.
Yes, their videos on authority are really interesting.
Yeah, it's the whole thing is it's a non-starter in terms of the. I mean, there's the separation of church and state exists for a reason.
Sure.
Not in this case.
Right? I mean, well, maybe not to them, but to the
Right.
eyes of the law, it does. So, and that's what matters. Yeah, it's a really bizarre case, and it's just. I mean, how did it work out for the Catholic Church? When all that started coming down the pipe with, the priests and the real issues that they were having with molesting young boys, and the same with the Boy Scouts, I mean, like all these kind of, institutions that have existed that really put predators in a prime position to be able to do what it is that they most desire doing. Eventually, you hope that the kids are going to finally start outcrying and it's going to be made public, because it's like that dominion and power that's held over these kids in terms of, and then when you add the family dynamic in, it just makes it all that much more difficult.
It's bred into. I mean, this kind of control is bred into them. I mean, that's 100%. Why it's so different from these other cults that start later in life, as Tony and I were talking about yesterday.
Right.
This is from birth. It is so you don't get over indoctrination that is part of who you are from all. It's only memories they have. It's just unbelievable.
I mean, you could make the argument that they don't know any better because that's all they've ever known.
You could. I mean, you might be able to actually, but they did get out there. I mean, that actually is an interesting argument.
Still not a defense, though.
Right. The problem is
it's not.
Ignorance of the law is no excuse.
Right. That's
no.
Yeah.
The other thought to this, and this is just pure conjecture, he hasn't been charged with anything else. This sort of shit never happens in a vacuum. Does anyone for 1 second believe that it just was he got a wild hair one day?
It was a one-off.
It's a one-off. I'm just gonna get this blanket and go sit with this 9-year-old over here. And I got some questions. I want to experiment. I mean, I don't think that's how this went.
No.
I'm thinking there might be a trend and a track record, and there might be other victims. Again, hasn't been charged with anything, but I'm gonna take a wild guess if we're just gonna base it on reality and how we know these fuckers work. There's probably more people,
and they don't even know their victims. So that's what's
and that's the thing.
They don't know their victims because this is the only life they know. Mm-hmm. This is the way it is.
It's the
anybody who had interactions with these pieces of shit with their children needs to be having some very serious conversations. The problem with that statement is most of the time they travel only within their own sect, within their own cult, within other cult members. So all the cult members, all the fathers who are right below Goddard and Jesus at Denny's, they're all ready to be like, the buck stops here. We'll handle this internally. But I would hope to God, literally, it's time to come forward. And if they do, and if there's a litany of more people that come out and have a horror story against Joseph Duggar, again, not saying there are, I have no idea, but if there are and they start coming forward, this is going to be the worst PR nightmare the Duggars have ever seen. They thought Josh was bad. Wait till this one continues to come forward.
It is, but it goes to what Robin was saying. Like the people that you think most about in those situations are the kids, because they're indoctrinated from birth and they know no different. And if you're not educated that something is wrong, because that's the thing that you deal with and we dealt with in this country forever until they started educating kids in school about abuse, and you are not the problem here. It's the predator that's the problem. It's not your fault. That person is doing something that they shouldn't be doing to you. And unless the kids are taught that, they don't know.
They don't know.
The most striking word watching the saddest TV specials I've been watching on this, and then reading on Jill's book, is the most powerful tool they use nonstop is shame.
Yeah,
they shame these kids into behaviors, and the most striking thing about that is who else? What other kind of horrendous human beings use that same power of shame? People that victimize children.
100%.
So it's exactly the same.
It's where they live.
Same behavior.
Yes.
These idiots better think long and hard before they get on the bandwagon of we love all of our children and we hope everything and get on the band like they did behind Joshy, where they were just like we love him and then they just kind of go silent. They better think long and hard about it with this one, especially if there ends up being a lot of allegations that start coming up against him, because that's gonna, I mean, they're already on the wrong side of history, but if they want to get even further deep, I mean, yeah, go ahead, dig in. Dig on in. Dig on in behind Joseph. That'll work out well for you.
This is why it's so challenging, because these cultures inoculate themselves from the outside scrutiny by marrying internally. You know,
Exactly.
that's why the father has to approve the courtship. He can only court someone that the father approves, who's going to be someone who's already indoctrinated into the system. You know, and so when you have that insular, you know, self-perpetuating cycle of crazy, then it's nothing ever comes to light. Because I was looking at the stats on this. You know, we talked about it yesterday, Tony. It's like the Amish have a lot of similar problems, but they actually are so cloistered that they don't interact with English all that often, and so it doesn't really come to light. But when you're looking at the raw numbers for legal cases for these types of cases, they're on par exactly with each other. Mm-hmm. But this group actually interacts more with the outside world than the Amish do. And it's not disparaging any of these things. We're just talking raw numbers.
Yeah, and I mean, to kind of go back to it, it's not just that shame aspect, but you know, they're taught there's a normalcy thing that they're indoctrinated into as well, that this is normal. This is how it's supposed to be. And again, if you're a child and you don't know any better, how are you supposed to know to outlie if you're being taught?
Did you see?
That's brainwashing. I mean, it's
totally.
Yeah.
And just talk about the normalcy of things. You know, part of the most horrendous thing, I called my wife, and she believes her when I start watching these things on TV, right? And I'm watching one of the videos of them giving instruction. One of the church leader up there giving instruction on how to properly spank a child on stage. He bends the boy over his knee on stage, shows him how to spank him, how he's going to love him more for him. And then he didn't give him a big enough hug. He spanked him some more and said, now give me a bigger hug.
Yeah. I don't know how people
That's exactly what trauma bonding is called.
I don't know how people watched it's not like the Duggars show was ancient history. You know, this was just a few years ago. This was like 10 years ago on TLC.
And it's all in your town, Tony. It's always in your town.
Yeah,
that's what I'm curious about.
So many people. Come. You'll find. Wait till July. You'll come join the cult.
It really is always in your town, man.
There's so many here. I know. But the thing is, the so many people watch this damn show and it's got their warm and fuzzies out of it. How does anybody look back at the clips of this show and not be completely creeped out?
Same like Ruby Frankie.
It's
exactly like Ruby Frankie.
I was creeped out back then watching it. I don't respect all religions. I think some need to be called the fuck out, and this is one of them. We need to stop respecting everybody that claims what they're doing is a religion when it's really just coercive control. I mean,
100%, but you're never going to be able to stop it because
you're not. Yeah,
because of the amendment. You know,
but we need to, as a society, not respect it socially. We need to call this shit out and not be like, oh, isn't that cute? You all like to wear skirts and repress your women. Oh, you have the right to do that. That's super, and you do have the right to do it. I have the right to say you're batshit fucking crazy, and these women, I hope to God, get away from you and disown you and never speak to you for the rest of your life, and you die in a flaming pit. Yeah. But you know, that's my right to say that too. But we need to do more of this rather than look at it as, oh, it's cutesy. Don't they make nice omelets when you stop at the Amish restaurant or whatever? Insert religion that represses human beings here. You know, it's sickening. And I'm so sick of pretending that there's something moral or godly or wonderful going on behind the closed doors that none of us see until they're fucking kids.
But T, it's like for every person like that thinks that it's just adorable and look at how cute it is, there's people like us. You know,
but there's not enough.
I watch that shit, I'm like, this is the weirdest shit I've ever seen.
I know.
People are freaks. You know, but you know, to each his own.
Yeah.
Therein lies the rub. But like ultimately, the accountability aspect of it, and it's that thing where you're really from the law enforcement side of it. You know, when they're trying to infiltrate, it's so damn hard.
It is.
Because of that protective bubble in terms of who they allow in. It's like I've done, like, Mike King with his, who's got his channel Profiling Evil, but like when he went in and was able to infiltrate that particular cult down there, where they had done essentially the same thing, and they had essentially bought like an entire neighborhood. Yeah. So they were insulated from the outside world, and it's those kids that are born into it. Yeah, that you're concerned with more than anything else, because consenting adults, I always sit here and wonder, how do people get brainwashed like that? And I'm talking about like doctors and educated people, where I'm always like, nobody's ever brainwashed me into some crazy shit like that. But then you see people on a equal educational level that are brainwashed into it. And it's, I mean, obviously you have to dive deep into what's going on with that person that puts them in a unique position to be so susceptible to it. But
acceptance and validation is a very, very powerful lever of influence over people.
100%.
And when you use that acceptance and validation and you throw some love bombing in there, and you're valued and seen for who you are, and you have any inkling of not having that in one aspect of your life, I don't care how educated you are, I don't care how emotionally intelligent you are, you can be extremely susceptible to it. Yep. I do believe, though, that as I was talking to Tony about this, hard to imagine us, like people that really dive deep and try to understand what's going on here, of not being inoculated against it. I do think we're inoculated against it just because we're fascinated by it. Right. But yeah, and that's what it comes down to. When groups and organizations offer a path to calm the chaos in your brain, and they always start out with a high level love bombing or validation or seeking of acceptance, all the things that our brain, the big four, are firing when you're getting, and they're not getting it from any other aspect of their lives. That's when it starts getting rooted and starts getting some traction, and then it's the slow build, it's the grooming into it.
100%, man. 100%.
There's so much, and there's going to be a lot more to come on these.
And I hate that case.
I know. It's going to be.
I like the case we're going to be talking about later today. That's what I like seeing happen to pedophiles.
Yeah. I've been looking forward to that one, Bob.
Yeah.
Your thoughts in the comment section on Substack and teaser. YouTube. We'd love for you to weigh in and give us your thoughts. Let's move over to another case that is going on right now that's getting a lot of attention. The trial of Kelsey Fitzsimmons. It comes down to one contested moment and one question: which direction was the gun pointed? The prosecution says she raised her service weapon and leveled it at a fellow officer's face and pulled the trigger, then attempted to re-rack it, and then she got shot. The defense says the gun never left her own temple, and that what the state is calling an assault is actually a mental health crisis that nearly ended her life. A judge, not a jury, will decide. Bob Motta is with us to help break all of this down. This is a confusing case. There's a lot of so many moving parts to it. Yeah. You have a mental health crisis, emergency going on still with her in this moment, even though she was cleared and she got her weapon back. Clearly, she wasn't in a healthy spot yet. And then the way it was handled as well. Now, were they following protocol? It looks like they might have been. Maybe that protocol needs to be changed. At the end of the day, nothing here was good on anybody's part. Bob, as you walk into this as a defense attorney, I've been so interested to talk to you about this one. What's your take on what's going on here in this?
Well, I mean, let's start with the biggest decision that was made, which was bench or jury, right? So that question for me, and we've been covering it on our channel, where Allie's streaming it with a former judge, Massachusetts retired judge, who's brilliant and who was very much involved in that area of the law during her time on the bench. So her insight's been invaluable. But where I was at, because if you follow the case from the beginning, the original judge was not friendly to the defense or to Kelsey Fitzsimmons at all. She was, depending on who you ask, either removed or she stepped away from the case. And so Judge Karp was put on. I looked into him in terms of his background a bit to kind of see what his track was. And he's been on both sides. He was a prosecutor, but he's also been a defense attorney. I love to see that. I love to see attorneys that have practiced on both sides of the aisle, because I think it really gives you a lot of insight that attorneys may not have if they've just done one or the other. And ultimately, from the last 2 pre-trials, I had landed on the assessment that if I was handling the case, I would be advising my client that in this particular case, where it's going to boil down to nothing more than reasonable doubt based on a he said and she said story, because there's no body worn cam, nobody else was in that room. You got 2 people giving 2 different sides of a story. I'm always concerned about, do juries truly understand the concept of what beyond a reasonable doubt means? I don't have that concern with judges. They know what it is, and they know to apply it not just globally to one charge. You have to apply it to each and every element of every charge. So, and in this case, when you're talking about an assault, they've met that burden on that one element, which is, did he have apprehension of fear that he was going to be harmed or worse? As soon as she had a gun in her hand, no matter where she's pointing it, they've checked that box. All right. So, but it's the intent is where this case lives in terms of trying to get into because they have to prove it. The state has to prove it, the Commonwealth, that it was her intent to cause him to have, and that's where this thing lies. So if her intent was to cause him that apprehension of fear of injury or death, then she's guilty, right? So, but at the end of the day, when you have 2 different stories, in my estimation, and it's a huge risk because you're going from 12 to 1 in terms of having a bench trial. It's like, I often I rarely go with a bench trial, and it depends on the judge. It depends on how familiar I am with the judge. It depends on the fact patterns. It depends on whether or not I think there's novel issues of law that I don't think that a jury might be able to grasp fully, that I really think that they need to in order for this case to be tried properly. And in this particular scenario, I thought it was the right call. I've seen nothing that changes my mind in terms of what I've seen in the first day and, few hours today. I think it was the right call for them, but ultimately that's Kelsey Fitzsimmons' vision. Not that, the lawyers just say, look, we think, and I'm sure that it was Bradle that said, look, I think that this is a bench trial. I think this is the way we go, because you remove the emotion from it. Like that is the thing that you're looking for. If you're defense counsel, you need to get that emotion out of it. And I'm talking about it all the time because it has no place in the law. Right. It just has no place in a courtroom. And the prosecution is adamant about getting it in because they know the power of it.
Sure. And Bob, so my question, one of the challenges, I'm curious about your thought on the challenge that I would think was a challenge in this. At least in the FBI, and I know every department's different, the deadly force policy is pretty liberal when it comes to all it has to be is perceived threat of violence to yourself or someone else on bodily injury or death, and deadly force is authorized. How will defense get by that? Because all it has to come down to is that one officer's perception. Again, you show a gun, and you said it right at the beginning, you show a weapon. It doesn't matter what she says is in her mind or her intent. All it matters is, at least from my understanding, that's why I'm curious from your perspective, what that officer thought it looked like.
So I'm only worried about that if Noonan's my client.
Right.
Like honestly, like what you're talking about, whatever his intent is, because 2 things can be true. His perception could be true, and what.
But wouldn't they automatically side then with prosecution? Because it does come down exactly that he said, she said perception wise, but doesn't it? But what I'm saying is, what you're talking about is a case against Noonan. What his perception is and whether or not it was a good and lawful shooting is irrelevant. Like that's not what's at issue here. What's really at issue is what she did with the weapon, because if she never aimed it at, if she aimed it at him and the judge is convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that she did, she's guilty. It's that simple. If he's not convinced and it's somewhere where it's a reasonable doubt, maybe she just, because you can't, that's why it's complicated,
you can't use deadly force with somebody who's going to kill themselves.
Well,
if you're protecting somebody else or yourself, it's one thing. you can't shoot and kill somebody if they're because
Right.
otherwise, what are you worried about? Like you're saying, don't kill yourself, but I'm going to kill you for you. It's that death by cop, suicide by cop.
And that's also
Which may,
potentiality there too.
And if Kelsey's crew is saying flat out, she never aimed it at him, then
Right.
they have nothing to argue. They can't argue. They can't go down the postpartum road. They can't go down like she wasn't in the right mental state. They can't go down any of that because she didn't do it, according to them. She never aimed it at him.
Right.
So that's, I mean, are they, pardon the pun, are they shooting themselves in the foot a little bit by using that story, by going with that story and saying that she never aimed it? Would you have more lateral move here or even more of a positive move if you were to say, yeah, she did, but look, she was not in her right mind. This is nothing she would have ever, it was horrible. It's a 5-year, sentence if she gets it.
And she's probation eligible and she would probably get it anyway, but
is it? But if you're saying she just didn't do it, and they're saying she did, these officers wouldn't necessarily go in there and want to shoot her. I mean, it's
definitely not.
It's just. But again, you're making that judgment call in those split seconds. If there's a gun and let's say she didn't aim at him, but let's say she pulled. Let's say other scenario here, she pulled the trigger and it didn't fire at her head. And then she goes back down and she's tapping the gun and she's trying to rack the gun and trying to get it to load again. In that second, that gun can go back up and it can go straight at you and it can go straight at her. You don't know where the hell it's going to go. As the officer, you then have to make that call in that moment. And I'm not saying right or wrong, but that's what would have happened if essentially.
But you guys are mixing it up. Like Noonan's not on trial.
I know
he's not on trial.
But what I'm saying is
Right.
the scenarios you keep giving me only matter if Noonan's on trial.
Right.
What only matters here is whether or not Kelsey's intent was to cause that apprehension.
So
of
the
fear
judge
or
just
doubt.
has to determine basically, are you lying? Did you aim it or did you not? And if you aimed it, you're going to jail. You're guilty.
Exactly. It's that simple. If the judge
Right.
finds Noonan to be credible, but he can find Noonan to be credible because, again, everything's about perception. Like in terms of
both perceptions could be right.
Exactly. So if she is acquitted, the one thing that I worry about with the bench trial is, look, I mean, in Massachusetts, they are appointed, and I think they're appointed for life. You're not elected in that state, but it's still a political office. And if you've got, politicians that are concerned about a massive lawsuit coming down the pike, you do worry about a bench trial wherein you've got a judge who doesn't necessarily want to say out loud in terms of an opinion or of rendering a verdict in that case. Well, yeah, I think this cop is a big fat liar, because that's opening the state in the jurisdiction and that county up to lawsuit and liability in that lawsuit. So that's one thing that I'm thinking about it as a defense attorney, like with going with the bench trial. But in terms of like that thing that we were talking about, T, where because what you're talking about is a mental defect type thing, like, well, because that makes it a much more difficult case. It really does, because I mean, there's without question, it was diagnosed postpartum. She had been cleared. She was supposed to be going back to work on the 3rd or the 4th. So, and she was theoretically in a good place. I mean, like,
according to the paperwork, she was. Obviously, she wasn't. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if it is. Like, I'm going to give you my typical pushback on that. So, as far as whether she was or she wasn't, we're talking about an ex parte restraining order. Okay, which means that Justin goes in on his own, and we don't know jack shit about him. Sure. Like now what I know is that he was placed on administrative leave because he was caught on the security camera of that house more than 200 times in the backyard, smoking weed and getting high. So I mean, we know very little about what was going on with these two folks. What I can tell you from, just forget about defense attorney, but just an attorney in general that has done plenty of not only criminal defense work, but plenty of divorce and custody work. And believe me when I tell you, that restraining orders, temporary restraining orders, are used as an absolute weapon in custody fights.
Sure, without a
Number
doubt.
one, to get people out of residences if they happen to be married and they have joint ownership, and also to get the upper hand on the custody, meaning that person has been given temporary custody of the children or the child prior to the thing being litigated, and it gives you an upper hand. So it is used all the time as a sword. It's not the intent of what that statute was.
Yeah.
What you have here is a guy who has a mother, who is a very interested grandmother, who is a mother, who's a grandmother who would very much like to have her grandbaby with her all the time, who is orchestrating shit in the background. And I'm not guessing on this. I've seen the emails or the text messages rather from Justin's mother to this lieutenant with the police department over there in North Andover. And, these are very personal type of messages, and it's all relating to, them helping them out. Hey, can you send a car by? All planting the seeds that Kelsey's batshit crazy. Right. And like all the little text messages. Oh, we heard that they're in town. We're worried they're going to come over. Like all of which has never been substantiated, because there's been not one shred of evidence that she ever in any way, shape, or form tried to abuse in any way that baby. Like, so that doesn't exist in the world as a reality.
Right.
It's this guy saying it, and his words carry whatever weight you assign to them.
Sure.
So you have this thing going on where he gets an ex parte, which means she's not there. She's not aware that it's going on. She's at home with her 4-month-old baby, and all of a sudden she gets a knock at the door. Okay. She doesn't get any forewarning, and she's got her department standing there saying, hey, we got to serve this RO on you. We have to take all your weapons, but more importantly, we've got to take your infant son. And Justin has temporary custody of him through this. You'll have your day in court. You can go to the hearing. You can disprove what he was saying. But here's where the problem lies with this case. And I don't know if you guys are aware of it. For some godforsaken reason, in a situation where you have a restraining order that is being served on somebody, and removal is an aspect, and I'm talking about removal of children from that house. That is one of, talking about lethality, like a situation becoming lethal. Robin, do what you do. Go
what I was doing.
Yeah, go look into it and see the number of lethal situations that arise out of specifically removal type situations where somebody's come and try to take somebody's kid.
Sure.
So not only do you have that going through, you have the fact that law enforcement is told by Justin, and this isn't even in the petition, he just says it. He says, "Oh, I'm worried she's going to kill the baby," with no substantiation behind it at all. But that's planted in the seed or into the minds of law enforcement heading over that day. Sure. Like they're talking about having to do to section her out to a 5150, like they got to pull her in because she's off her rocker, and it's all based on an ex parte hearing where, again, nothing was challenged. Anybody can go into court and say whatever the hell you want, and if the judge who is not getting any resistance to what you're putting on there, the judge can say, well, yeah, I'm going to err on the side of caution, I'm going to grant it, and then you get that hearing set up. So not only does that happen, but what they decide to do, which is inexplicable to me, is they tell that dude to come to the house to get the baby. So I need you to understand it. So she's upstairs, and then she's told that Justin and his sister are there to collect the baby. That is not how that works. That is not
20 to 40%, Bob. Studies of domestic violence custody removal cases show that 20 to 40% involve some level of resistance, threats, and physical confrontation when law enforcement shows up.
Yeah.
High percentage.
Yeah. You're creating such a volatile environment, and like like they're going to walk in and be like, "Oh, just give us a kid. Okay, see you later."
Right.
It's not how that is. Like this, you're going into someone who we already know is having some rough mental times, and this could have been there's so many ways this could have been handled better. I mean,
but I don't want you to undervalue the point that they brought in the guy who went in ex parte, who was ripping her child away from her. Some shit he said, and they're introducing him to that scene. So I don't think we're here having this trial if she is not told that, yeah, Justin's in the house and he's grabbing that. Like, I think that put her over the top.
That was a trigger. Yeah.
There is no way that guy should have been there.
Sure.
Zero chance. It should have been a social worker who wasn't in the house. If they're concerned about, and if they're talking about sectioning her, that tells you what their mindset is going in.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to delve into the mindset of these cops, and are they on high alert walking into that house? And we know the answer. We know the answer is yes, because of the information they've been provided. So that factors in terms of Noonan's perception. Like, he is walking into that house having been told certain things, whether true or not matters not to him, in terms of, this is where I'm at mentally. This girl, like, from what I'm hearing, could pop off at any second. So he's on super, super high alert. And then when you introduce the fact that the very person that has made this happen, who is responsible for her having her baby ripped away from her at 4 months old, is in the house along with his sister, at that point, man, you know, like, it's hard to say what would be going through a normal person's mind, but you know, like, from where we're at, everything was right with the world. Like, I am the last person. I have 4 kids. My wife has had 4 babies. She was fortunate not to have postpartum depression, but like, that's a real thing.
Oh God, yeah.
I've
lived it.
No one to blame. Yeah. Like, that's not Kelsey's fault that she was feeling.
No, not at all. No.
Right. So, but that reality is, she got over it. She was over the hump. And where she's sitting on June 30th is that she's excited. She's got her baby. She's going back to work. And then all of a sudden, Justin had decided, for whatever reason, based on whatever, again, we have no idea what was going on in that relationship. He uses this, you know, this bachelor party where he's got a drinking issue. Like, he's not a clean hands guy in this. Like, let's not try to make Justin, like, neither one. These are just people.
Sure.
Like, and like all of us, we all have issues. So like this, again, it's not a story. It's not a movie. This is real damaged people who have their own issues, whether it be alcohol, drugs, a combination of both. It is what it is. And, you know, it could have been avoided if it had been properly handled. And the blame falls on the North Andover Police Department, in terms of, because they did not follow procedure. I assure you, bringing a civilian into that scene when they're serving it in a removal case is not standard operating procedure. It's not. And to make it even worse, it's the very guy who's getting the custody. I mean, like, the concept of it is insane. You know, so
But did she point the weapon? That, I mean, at the end of the day, that
comes down to
that's what it all goes back to. All of the minutia, it's there, but did she do that? And that's the question.
And how's the judge decide that? I'm curious.
To me, like, so I was just saying it before I jumped on your stream. This entire thing is going to, if I'm going to win that case on defense, I'm bringing in a mental health expert, but specifically somebody dealing with memory and trauma responses to memory, and how it was you cannot in any way, shape, or form be able to clearly remember something in a high trauma situation, because, again, your perception, what you were thinking going into it, all of that. Do you have a motive to lie? If you're a cop and you're worried about it being ruled a bad shooting, you're going to be aware of that very, very, very soon after, if not going into it. As soon as you pull the trigger, you're gonna be like, oh shit, you know. So like, he's got a motive to lie. I mean, she's got a motive to lie.
They all do. Yeah. I mean, that's where it's like, let's ask another human to tell us what reality was. And we have no way of ever truly confirming it either way. That's
so I'm putting a memory expert on, because that it just creates reasonable doubt, where you can't really trust either of their memories in terms of what they thought, because it's their perceptions, and it's based on a 3-second, 4-second interaction where they shut it down. It's a tough case, man. It's a tough case.
Your thoughts in the comment section on Substack and YouTube. We'd love for you to weigh in. Do drop them right there. The links are in the description. One more case I want to get to today. A trial date is finally on the calendar, June 22nd. After months of delays, a judge removed, and a primary election that turned this case into a national story, the clock is now running for real. The next 90 days will determine whether Aaron Spencer walks into a general election as a candidate, or walks into a courtroom as a convicted felon. The public thinks it knows this story. The prosecution says it doesn't. In less than 3 months, a jury in Arkansas is going to decide which version is right. One father, one dead predator, and a system that's being asked to explain itself. Bob Motta is with myself at Robin Dreeke to help break all of this down. We got our dates, the 22nd. There's been a lot of argument. Should this stay here? Should it move somewhere else? We have a new judge that thankfully is on this case. It's not the same one that let the offender out to begin with. Where do you think we're standing here now that there's been a little breathing room between where we thought the trial was going to start to where we're sitting right now with a date of June 22nd?
I think there's still, so what happened in the interim, let me jump back.
Yeah.
So they had the primaries down in your neck of the woods, and Aaron Spencer was running, and he won the primary. I guess the only person he's going up against during the general election in November is an independent. So I think there's a hope within the Spencer camp that the state's going to think better of this and decide not to try it. I keep trying to tell the family, I'm like, I just don't want you to kind of like, that's probably not going to happen. This thing's going to trial. They're too dug in, which is unfortunate. You know, it's sad that it's that way because it's not a case that I think needs to be tried. And I think if you were to poll the public at large down there, they would agree, like massively. It would be a landslide type situation. So, I mean, like, this allows the attorneys to go ahead and say, you know what, we're gonna have the new judge reconsider a bunch of the rulings that were made by the prior judge because we think that she got them wrong. And I mean, it gives them that opportunity to really kind of dig in a bit more with some of the decisions which is the one advantage of getting a new judge, because you have the option to be able to say, we're basically asking you to relitigate these, not even reconsider what that judge did. We want you to form your own opinion on it. And typically the judges will do it. So this gives them the time to do that. Whether or not they're going to do it is unknown yet. We'll find out when they file things. I certainly would be trying to do it, especially with the lost dashboard cam video, which is inexplicable to me. I mean, like, the entire event theoretically was recorded and somehow got lost by law enforcement. Like, and we're talking about that the predator had a dashboard cam in his vehicle, which in theory would have caught all of it on tape.
When can they start? I mean, we have so many damn cases like this, Bob, where it's like, oh, they lost it, and that's just kind of where it ends. There's no those things should almost be litigated. Really? You lost it? Then let's go figure out how you lost it. Right. Let's go take a look at the timestamps of where this was deleted and why and how. And let's just see how much of an accident it was. I mean, if they're started, I mean, what needs to be done so this isn't such an easy lever for law enforcement to pull? Does it need to be like literally on the books of like, look, if this material is gone or destroyed or deleted, there will be a criminal investigation into that specific act of doing that? Would that slow people down from doing it because there would be really clear paths to busting people for destroying evidence? I don't know what needs to be done here, because clearly this happens all the time, and it doesn't seem like it's that far of a puddle to jump over for law enforcement, because they use this lever a lot to avoid accountability.
Yeah, man, here's where the problem is that the burden is on the defense to prove it.
Yeah.
It can't, because it's easy for the cops to come in and say, oh, it was accidentally erased.
It should be other totally separate from the case. It's just like, oh, this was deleted. Well, that's illegal to have that deleted or to be lost.
Right.
So,
I mean, but that becomes a very slippery slope. You know what I mean?
All I can do on this,
accidentally deleted.
Well, I mean, and there probably are cases where they could look. Okay, yes, this was truly. There will inevitably be truly accidental deletions. But if we make it far more important, like, you don't do this. Really be careful. Don't fuck with this material, because if something happens, if whatever happens and it's gone, you could go to prison for that. I mean, there's other things we have in our world where it's like, if you screw with this, that could be very bad. So we take a lot of extra precaution not to let something bad happen with this over here. But with this sort of stuff, it's kind of like, nah.
So here's the reality of how these things typically work, is that until you're actually called on the carpet because something went sideways, you're not going to fix a broken system. And so, I mean, just think about the number of law enforcement agencies out there that have had to have, one, you had to get funded for body cams. Then you have to maintain body cams. You have to train the officers to remember to turn on the body cams and then keep it. And so what happens is that people get lax, they get lazy because they go out on hundreds of calls a day or a week. And then the one time they needed it, they didn't have the reps they needed because the training faltered, the equipment was faltering. So the reality is until it becomes an issue, it won't become an issue. And so unfortunately, that's the way it happens a lot of times. And sometimes it's bad actors, and sometimes it's just
incompetence.
Incompetence
right
in the system. I tend to edge more on, having been in the system, I tend to edge more on the incompetence in the system
100%.
A lot more than bad actors on the inside. Because believe me, these cops don't want shit to go sideways because it'll end their careers, and they got to provide for families. And 100%. They know 100% if they're involved in a case like this and they don't have the body cam, the first thing they're saying to themselves is not, oh, thank God I don't have the body cam. They're saying, oh shit, I don't have the body cam. So that's generally the way it goes.
Yeah, and I think the counter to that would be, it's an incredibly dangerous job, and I think that everybody would agree that they're, for the amount of danger that they're really exposed to, they're grossly underpaid, which always leads to that thing where, if they're doing a drug raid and you got two partners running into that back closet and they find a giant pile of cash and they're looking at one another like, we're making fucking $60,000 a year. And we're like, we could get killed any day we step foot onto the streets with this uniform on. I'm going to give you 10 large and I'm going to take you. So, I mean, because of the structure in terms of how we compensate these people that are doing this incredibly dangerous job, it almost encourages them to maybe step over the line a bit, which becomes a very, very slippery slope. It could start with, all right, no one knows how much cash is in here. No one's going to know 20 grand's missing if we each take a stack and shove it in our vest. So, you're still getting a big pile. It'll all go to the state and they can use it to buy boats and whatever the fuck they're going to do with it. But that problem becomes is once you become corrupt with that one little taste, it then becomes a very, very slippery slope. And it also, the concept of I need to rise up in the ranks, which is typically going to be determined by the amount of closed cases you get, can also encourage, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and drop this key fob here, in the Avery thing. I don't know where I'm at on Avery. Do I think that the cops did that whole thing and play? No, I don't. But do I think that in order to make sure that they got the conviction on the guy that they were sure had done it, do I think that they dropped that fucking key fob? Yes, I do. You know what I'm saying? But they had all kinds of other evidence, but that is the kind of evidence where, okay, you had 4 searches in that house and nobody saw it, and then all of a sudden it appears. It's strange. So I think the answer to Tony's question is as much like in the world of suppression motions, there has to be greater teeth. And they've got to work on that burden on the defense, because how am I supposed to prove intent from a law enforcement agency where I have zero access to what they're doing? You're asking for an impossible burden to be able to hurdle, because I don't have access. I'm like, okay, Judge, I'll happily. Are you going to allow me to go in? Can I subpoena all their shit and dig through all their shit? And then I'll find it for you. Because short of that, how do you expect me to prove bad intent?
Yeah, you're asking them to police themselves then too. It's just there just seems to be far too easy ways to cheat if one wants to.
That's what I'm saying. You got to make teeth. You got to make teeth to where, all right, you know what? You lost that evidence. now you lost the case.
I lived in a glass bubble. I was just surrounded by good people. I really was. I mean, I went to work every day to do the righteous work, and I had to get around bosses that were stupid. I had to get around the organization that was fixated on getting promoted and agendas. But I was fortunate. I know and I did a lot of training with a lot of law enforcement across the country where I trained them on leadership and things like that. So I'm generally the glass is half full. I know there's bad apples and bad actors out there, but I do see an amazing amount that actually are doing the right thing, that they're not going to see that pile of cash and go for it.
100%. I think that's a majority.
And yeah, it is, and not even be tempted by it. I mean, it's like when you see someone go bad and they see themselves a wound collecting victim in all these situations, and they're saying, "Oh, I did it because I don't get paid enough," or they're using some rationalization excuse to be an ass. The only thing I say is, well, then quit, get another job. Because the people that serve join to serve; they're not joining to take. So it is sad when it happens.
Like you were a Fed, dude. You know what I mean? Like you're that's a different thing than kind of a low level
and a Marine.
Sheriff department. You know what I'm saying? Like I mean, you get all types.
I know.
It's like your education level is such where I love everybody like Robin Dreeke becoming law enforcement, because you're the guy I want in there. You're the guy I trust, because inherently you're a good person. You went in with, because I don't think that people get into law enforcement thinking like, oh, I'm going to go rob drug dealers. I don't think
it is not a profitable, thing that you're going to do for life.
It's a dangerous gambit on top of it.
Right.
So like, but I think that what happens, like, well, let me put this ponderable to you, Robin.
Yes,
so
ponderable. I love that word.
Say you've got a case where you are 100% absolutely certain that you've got the right guy. However, you're missing that one piece of evidence, that and you are certain of it. Mm-hmm. It's unequivocal. You know that you've got the guy, but you're missing that one piece of evidence that allows you to get in front of a judge and get an arrest warrant. And that temptation, in terms of, because you're theoretically, morality wise, you're doing the right thing because you're taking a monster off the street. I uncovered it in Gacy. That's what happened in Gacy. They knew that Gacy had kidnapped Rob Peast and most likely killed him, but they knew that he kidnapped him. It had to have been him. And he was the last person to see the kid alive, and the kid has vanished off the face of the earth. And he's not a kid that was, running off to California. His mother was adamant about that. So they knew, but they couldn't. They had the first search of the house. They couldn't find anything related to Rob Peast. They followed him for 10 days. Gacy's not a moron. He's not going to kill one. Because it was an open and notorious tale, because they didn't have the manpower to do a surreptitious tale. So he knows that they're following him. So he's not going to go kill anybody while they're following. So they don't get anything. In 10 days. In the meantime, Gacy runs into federal court, files for a temporary restraining order to stop the 24/7 tale, which he was going to win because they'd searched his house once and they'd been following him for 10 days, and they didn't get it. The federal courts aren't going to let you follow somebody in perpetuity the way that they were, like where it's open and obvious, and they're following him into restaurants, and they're coming into his house. So they were going to end it. So they were put in this situation where, for all intents and purposes, that investigation was going to end right then and there as soon as the federal judge granted that TRO, which created a desperate times call for desperate measures situation, which is how that receipt becomes infused as if it was found in his house in order to get the second warrant, which is what they got. And then they went in and they found the bodies. So but that's that scenario that I'm talking about where you just know that you've got the guy, but you just don't have the evidence to get him. Here's where I know, and I guarantee that's where the worry is. But here's where I'm going to give the glass half full on what guys like me do in those situations. One, get better. You own it, and you just dig deeper to stay on the righteous path, because here's what good, healthy-minded people do. You play that shit forward. You play forward. Let's suppose we take that action.
when you do something wrong, when you have a lack of transparency and openness and abiding by the law, it will be found out. Just if you're looking at percentages, it's going to be found out at some point. And what's going to happen when that happens? You're destroyed, the case is destroyed, and the guy's going to walk. So why do it? Yeah, I mean, so either way, the guy will eventually walk, either it's by your hand or his own. See what I mean? So the clear-minded people. But that's why you have leadership.
They didn't catch that. It took 45 years for me to uncover it. It came from the cops.
I know.
You know what I mean? So, and in that situation, it was literally what the cop said. Mike Albrecht is like, because I asked him, I'm like, there has to be something that you've never told anybody in all the interviews you've done. He says, well, he's like, there's one thing. He's like, that photo receipt? I'm like, yes, I know that photo receipt. And then he tells me the story that it really wasn't found in the house, that the lieutenant said that the story was going to be that they found it on the garbage pull from the curb, which is fair game. You don't need a warrant for that. Like once it hits the curb, anybody can dig into it. It's still strong evidence. Is it as strong as, hey, we found it in the inside garbage in terms of like, it's clear that the kid was in here because the receipt from the pharmacy that was in the kid's pocket is in his house, and it can only have gotten there if Rob Peast was there. That's powerful evidence. It's still powerful. So I told Mike, I'm like, look, man, and Mike, what he said is Gacy's dead. I don't have to worry about an appeal. So like he would, but what they did in that case is Kozenzak kept it very, very narrow. He kept a very, very small amount of people that knew it. It was Kozenzak, and I think it was Ron Adams, his right-hand man. The guys on the street that were out doing the work, pounding the pavement, knocking on doors, talking to witnesses, they had no idea. You know what I mean? And so like he insulated them from what was going on with it. But like when I broke it, I'm like, how do I handle this? Because it's the greatest morality play in the history of morality.
And it's great. It's a great vignette.
Yeah,
it really is.
He's a fucking monster. It's like it's that question. If you had the opportunity to kill Hitler, knowing what we know now, would you do it back then? And
so in cases like this, it comes down to first of all, you have people. You don't have to have 100% of organization with the righteous mindset. You only need is one in a leadership position to be able to keep poking people in the righteousness, because people want to do the right thing, but they're going to be tempted to do the convenient and easy thing for a righteous reason. In situations like that, we had an expression in the Marine Corps: if you're going to play, you got to pay. And so, if you're going to put yourself on the line to do something like that, even though you think it's righteous, just stand up and be ready, because when that shit comes down on you, you got to own it, and you might be going to jail with them. So,
and that's how I sold it at the end of the day, because it was a cautionary tale. Because I had Bill Kunkel on, who was the lead prosecutor, and his reality is, had my father asked one question during the suppression motion, which was, who was the evidence tech that was following you around the day of the first search? Because I hunted that guy down 45 years later, found him in Colorado. He did not work with the Des Plaines police. He was Cook County Sheriff's Office, and he was the evidence tech that they supplied to them because they didn't have a big enough department. So that guy, no one ever spoke to, no one ever saw their reports. And when I asked him, I'm like, look, you were the guy following him around, taking the pictures, keeping the evidence log. If I'm looking at the evidence log from that day to that search, and this photo receipt's not there, what does that mean? It means it wasn't there, because I would have photographed it and I would have noted it and I would have said where we were sending it off to. And so I knew at that point, and then it becomes that thing. Had my father asked and he had discovered who that guy was, that entire case falls apart. Everything is fruit of the poisonous tree, including the confessions that Gacy gave. All of it goes away. And then Bill Kunkel is charged with the most horrific task I can think of, which is to go to these families and say, the guy's walking because we fucked up. That's that thing that you're talking about, Robin. Like, you need that person in that position, letting the guys and the gals know that are working on the force that this is the possible ramifications if you're so tempted to do so. 100%. Step away from it. Don't do it. Because with Gacy, they could have just followed him.
And then you got to live with that shit the rest of your life too. It's so much easier. I've made similar calls, not to that kind of extent, where I played that tape forward. I can have this win for this righteous reason, and I now have the burden of carrying that for the rest of my life, as opposed to I don't do it. I stick on the righteous, rightful path of doing what's right, and then I just have to carry the burden of I screwed up.
Yeah.
I can get over I screwed up a lot easier because I can then get better tools. I can own it. I can move on. I can teach others not to do that. I mean, so yeah, it's.
I think the other part of it too, Robin, is that what I would like to see, because I'm very close friends with the old retired Chicago cop who, I met through the Gacy season, who was like, Bill Dorsch is a guy that ultimately was chased out of this country by Chicago PD because he was a whistleblower.
Yeah.
And I think that cops have to feel like, if I see wrong happening, if I see illegal things happening within my department, I can't be afraid to go to my superiors and rat that guy out for fear of my career or worse.
Yeah.
And like, if you can establish, I mean, no one wants rats, but no one wants bad cops, because the problem with one bad apple in a particular department is it spoils the whole bunch.
Yeah,
in terms of the public's perception
100%.
of that department, man, where you could have like 50 great cops and two assholes, and the entire department is tainted because of those two guys. So I think like, and I don't know how you go about that. I don't know that you'd know way better than I, the mechanics of like giving officers the freedom to say, hey man,
top down. Like, it is 100% leadership, 100% at the top. Right? You got to be able to encourage that relationship where we actually have that kind of transparency, and then trust is built on little things. Whatever you think politically of Rudy Giuliani afterwards, but when he was actually mayor of New York, he actually conquered the crime in New York by trying to take the squeegee guys off the street. Because when you actually attack things at the granular level, it filters up then that, hey, if they're going to pay attention to something that's so small, I can count on them for the big things. And so you build that trust, you build that trust reservoir at that small granular level, saying, I got your back on this, I got your back on this, I got your back on this, and then encourage that kind of transparency interagency wise, internally, so that way you can mitigate shit before it reaches that level. And also, when you're doing that, people value the things they're doing every day. They're going to do things the right way, the proper way. So the chance of something going sideways, investigations going wrong, where they be in the position to try to cheat the system a little bit, doesn't even come up. Yeah. So that's why it's leadership.
100%, man.
Mandelbaum.
You think you can take me?
I can take. Oh!
You show him, Pops.
All right, that's gonna. I just watched that one the other day. Seinfeld, if you're playing along at home.
It's a great one.
All right, that's going to wrap up this episode of the program. Your thoughts in the comments section on Substack and YouTube. We'd love for you to weigh in. Be sure to press subscribe wherever you're getting podcasts so you don't miss any of our episodes. Go check out Bob's podcast, Defense Diaries, and YouTube channel, wherever you get podcasts, or YouTube, which happens to be YouTube. So go find him there. Robin's new book, it is out right now. It's Not All About Me. It is available wherever you get books. Go and get that right now as well.
100%.
Until next time, for Robin, for Bob, for Todd, I'm Tony Brueski. We will talk again real soon.
Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Brueski and the Hidden Killers podcast.